Okay, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for another exciting session of the 2025 gLOCAL Evaluation Week. My name is Maria Roslyn Muzachi, and I'm a Senior Knowledge Management Officer at the African Development Bank's Independent Development Evaluation Function. You are warmly welcome to today's session, which is jointly organized by the African Development Bank and the World Bank. The session you're joining, as you've seen, is Bridging the Gap, Advancing Gender Inclusion in Transport for Sustainable Development. We are pleased to have you with us for this important discussion, and I'm going to share a few housekeeping rules with you. We kindly request you to have your microphone and video disabled if you are not speaking, unless you are a member of the panel. We have translation in both English and French, so kindly click on the globe icon at the bottom to choose your preferred language. Then when it's time for the question and answer, or even if you have a question during the session, kindly feel free to type it in the Q&A chat section or in the chat box. And also, when it comes to time for the Q&A, you can raise your hand and then the moderator will be able to choose you, and then your microphone will be enabled for you to speak. And ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's session, Ms. Nelly Maina. Nelly is a Principal Gender Officer within the Gender, Women and Civil Society Department of the African Development Bank. Nelly brings over 20 years of experience working on gender issues in Africa and Central Asia. She has led gender mainstreaming across a various range of sectors, including infrastructure, which we are going to discuss today, but also in agriculture, governance, and public finance, among others. Nelly has previously worked as a gender expert in leading international organizations that include the United Nations World Food Programme, Action Aid International, World Vision International, Save the Children, and Mercy Corps. With her deep expertise and commitment to inclusive development, we believe that today we're in excellent hands. Nelly, I hand over the session to you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, please receive my sincere apologies. My video is just not working, so we're going to have to deal with my voice. And the good thing is I'm not the center of attraction today. We have a wonderful team that is going to be speaking to us. So today I am honored to serve as your moderator for this important conversation. We are going to highlight the critical importance of integrating gender equality into transport initiatives. We will explore innovative strategies and practices for gender mainstreaming from a range of regional contexts here in Africa. So over the next slightly less than 2 hours, we will hear insightful presentations from research and evaluation teams at the African Development Bank and the World Bank. Additionally, a panel of experienced practitioners and policymakers will share how their work is shaping more gender-responsive transport systems that support resilience and sustainable development. Our objective here today is to exchange knowledge, encourage dialogue, promote collaboration, and formulate concrete recommendations that can drive progress in making transport systems inclusive and gender responsive. Now, one of the 3 pillars of the African Development Bank gender strategy is increasing women's access to social services through infrastructure development. This is done through leveraging infrastructure projects to unlock opportunities for women and enhance access to social services. Some of the key questions that we are going to explore today include: how can we make transport systems more accessible, safe, and affordable for everyone, and especially women? In what ways can we ensure that transport projects respond to the distinct mobility needs of women, men, girls, and boys? How can transport infrastructure and services be leveraged to create economic opportunities, especially for women? What steps can we take to challenge and transform gender stereotypes within the transport sector? And importantly, what roles can various stakeholders play in ensuring transport initiatives are truly transformative and inclusive? To officially open this session, it is my great pleasure to invite Dr. Rafael Fossil to deliver the opening remarks. Rafael brings a wealth of experience to his role as Division Manager at the Independent Development Evaluation, or IDEV, of the African Development Bank. He leads evaluations across some of the most impactful and transformative sectors on the continent, including power and energy, climate change and green growth, private sector development, infrastructure and industrialization, and regional integration. His work plays a vital role in shaping evidence-based decisions that drive sustainable and inclusive development across Africa. He has over 20 years experience in both the public and private sectors and has worked for several organizations, including UNDP, USAID, World Bank, FHI 360, Tech, and World Vision International. Dr. Fossil holds a PhD in economics from the University of Oldenburg, Germany, and an MA in development policy from the University of Bremen in Germany. Welcome so much, Dr. Fossil. Over to you.
Thanks, Nena. Thank you, dear moderator, presenter, and panelists. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us today. It's my great honor to welcome you to this important session of the gLOCAL Evaluation Week 2025, focused on gender in evaluation, particularly in the context of transport sector. I would like to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to all our partners, participants, stakeholders whose support and presence makes this conversation possible. I would like particularly to thank our colleagues from the World Bank for their valuable contribution in preparing this session. We share a dedication to building more inclusive, evidence-informed system, policies and strategies and operations through evaluation. Advancing gender inclusion in transport is not only a matter of equity, but a vital step toward building more sustainable and inclusive societies that offer economic and social opportunities to all. gLOCAL, in this context, provides the global local bridge we need to share evidence, scale innovations, and spark transformation policy dialogue. Transport is not just about roads, railways, or mobility infrastructure. It's about access to opportunities, to markets, to education, to health services. And yet, the design, implementation, and evaluation of transport system have historically been gender blind. Too often, women's mobility needs, safety concerns, and economic and social roles have been overlooked in transport sector policy, in planning, and investment decision. This is why incorporating gender into transport sector evaluation is not simply a matter of equity, it's a matter of effectiveness and impact. When we evaluate with a gender lens, we began to understand how policies and projects affect men and women differently, and a lack of access to affordable transport can prevent women from seeking employment outside their immediate communities, and unsafe transport system can increase vulnerability to harassment and gender-based violence. These insights have a profound implications. They tell us not only how inclusive or exclusive our infrastructure intervention really is, but also where the gap lies, what we can do to close them. Evaluation plays a key role in this space. Through well-designed, gender-sensitive evaluation, we can gather disaggregated data, consult diverse users, assess outcomes that matter to different segments of the population. We can shape evidence that guides policymakers, engineers, urban planners to design systems that serve everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, at the Africa Development Bank, we are committed to advancing gender and equity across all our operations. At IDEV, we ensure our evaluation consistently address gender consideration, not just a component of social inclusion, but as essential for achieving sustainable and effective development outcomes. That's why in our recent evaluation of the bank's support to transport sector, we conducted a thematic study on the impact of interventions on women, which my colleague Joseph will soon present to you. Let me be clear. Gender-responsive evaluation are not optional. They are essential. They help us answer fundamental questions: who benefits from our investment, in what ways, who is being left behind, and why, and how we can design for meaningful impact, not just measurable outputs. The insights from these questions are vital for shaping more effective policies, strategies, and operations in the future. We must also acknowledge that the vital role of partnership in advancing this agenda. For evaluation to drive real change, policymakers and decision makers must be open to using evaluation evidence. Today's discussion brings together a strong coalition of evaluators, government officials, civil society actors, and development partners who recognize the power of evaluation to foster accountability and drive transformation. As we proceed, I invite all of to consider how we can strengthen our collective effort to build evaluation systems that are not only technically sound, but also support economic and social progress. Let us continue to challenge assumptions, amplify marginalized voices, ensure that our data tells the full story. In closing, I want to thank each of you once again for all your presence, your insights, and your ongoing commitment to gender-responsive evaluations. Together, we can shape transport system, broader development policies that work better to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fasil, for setting the ground for our discussions today. We've heard that gender-responsive transport systems are not optional, and they can be a gateway or a barrier to economic opportunities. So for our program today, it is structured into two key parts. We'll begin with 2 presentations, followed by a panel discussion featuring very experienced practitioners and policymakers. After each section, we'll open the floor for questions, comments, and recommendations. And also, it's an opportunity for you to engage, to reflect, and to share your ideas so that we can, shape the future for gender-responsive transport. Now, you may also make your interventions in French or English as interpretation is available. So let's dive into the first part of our session, and I will now introduce our 2 presenters. Our first presentation will be delivered by Joseph Mwanda, a Chief Evaluation Officer at the IDEV of the African Development Bank. Joseph is a statistician economist with over 2 decades of experience at IDEV, where he has led a wide range of evaluations, particularly in transport, energy, water supply, and sanitation. In addition to his evaluation work, he has contributed to evaluation capacity development and knowledge management within the African Development Bank. He began his career in Cote d'Ivoire's education sector and has taught at the National School of Statistics and Applied Economics in Abidjan. He holds an MSc in Statistics and Applied Economics and is a certified knowledge manager. Our second presenter is Aram Gassama, a research analyst with the World Bank's Development Impact Department, commonly known as DIME. Aram works with the ieConnect team, supporting impact evaluations in the transport sector, and she also coordinates DIME's evaluation activities in Senegal. Her research spans critical areas including mobility, climate, and gender, reflecting her strong commitment to inclusive and sustainable development. She holds a master's degree in public policies and development economics and a bachelor's degree in economics and law, both from the Toulouse School of Economics. So to start off, please join me in welcoming Joseph Mwanda. The floor is now yours. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. I will speak in French. Mesdames et messieurs, chers participants, c'est pour moi un honneur de participer à cet événement de partage de connaissances. Cette rencontre revêt une importance particulière car le thème abordé, à savoir promouvoir l'inclusion du genre dans le secteur des transports pour un développement durable, est particulièrement important au vu de nombreuses fausses idées reçues qui freinent souvent la mise en œuvre de politiques réellement inclusives. Par exemple, le transport est neutre du point de vue genre. Les infrastructures de transport profitent à tout le monde de la même manière. La consultation des femmes n'est pas nécessaire pour concevoir un projet de transport. Disons-le sans détour, tout cela est faux. Les connaissances évaluatives que je vais m'atteler à partager avec vous découlent, comme l'a dit Raphaël, d'une étude de cas thématiques sur le genre, entreprise dans le cadre de l'évaluation de l'assistance de la Banque au secteur des transports pour la période 2012-2023. Cette étude de cas thématiques a évalué l'impact des interventions de la Banque de développement dans le secteur des transports sur les femmes, notamment au sein de trois pays, disons, Sénégal, Tanzanie et Kenya. Pourquoi le genre est important dans le secteur des transports? Les femmes présentent des schémas de mobilité plus complexes et plus vulnérables. Les habitudes de mobilité des femmes et des hommes présentent des disparités marquées. Les femmes sont plus exposées aux trajets courts, multiples et hors des heures de pointe, souvent à pied ou en transport public, en raison de leurs responsabilités familiales. Les femmes privilégient la marche et les moyens de transport peu réglementés, souvent en raison de ressources financières limitées ou d'un accès insuffisant à d'autres options. À l'échelle mondiale, le pourcentage de femmes dans la main-d'œuvre du secteur de transport s'élève à seulement 12%. Dans la région Moyen-Orient et Afrique du Nord, ce pourcentage se situe à 3%. Dans le cadre de notre analyse des défis liés au genre dans le secteur des transports en Afrique, nous avons identifié 4 principaux obstacles. En termes d'accessibilité, les infrastructures de transport ne sont pas toujours adaptées aux besoins des personnes utilisant des poussettes, des personnes âgées ou de celles transportant des charges lourdes. Cette situation représente un défi courant pour les femmes assumant des responsabilités familiales. L'Afrique accuse également un retard significatif en termes de qualité des routes, se situant nettement en dessous d'autres régions telles que l'Asie, l'Europe et l'Amérique du Nord et du Sud. En termes d'abordabilité, les femmes sont confrontées à des défis spécifiques liés à leur statut socio-économique. Elles peuvent bénéficier de revenus plus limités et avoir un accès plus restreint aux ressources financières, ce qui a un impact sur leur capacité à accéder aux services de transport et assurer les coûts associés. Du point de vue de la sécurité, les femmes sont plus exposées aux harcèlements et à la violence dans les espaces publics et mal éclairés. Pour éviter le risque, elles privilégient souvent des itinéraires plus longs ou plus coûteux, ce qui restreint leurs accès à l'emploi, à l'éducation et aux services. Enfin, au niveau de l'adéquation, les transports publics ne répondent que rarement aux besoins spécifiques de mobilité des femmes. En effet, les transports publics ne sont pas conçus en tenant compte des priorités et des schémas de déplacement liés au genre. L'analyse a identifié ou a mis en exergue des pratiques promoteuses dans le secteur de transport en matière de genre. Par exemple, l'initiative FLOWN, qui est une organisation kenyane qui œuvre pour rendre les transports publics plus sûrs, inclusifs, accessibles, en particulier pour les femmes et les groupes vulnérables. Il y a également l'initiative Femmes dans la logistique, appelée WILA, qui est une organisation panafricaine à but non lucratif, créée en 2021 et dont le siège est basé à Abidjan, en Côte d'Ivoire. WILA est dédiée à la promotion de l'égalité des genres et au renforcement du leadership féminin dans le secteur de la logistique et de la chaîne d'approvisionnement à travers le continent africain. Enfin, il y a l'outil Chicane, en anglais Sexual Harassment Engagement, Changing Attitude, Meeting Need, qui est une ressource pratique et fondée sur les données probantes. Il est conçu pour aider les décideurs politiques, les autorités de transport et les organisations de société civile à lutter contre le harcèlement sexuel dans les systèmes de transport public en Afrique subsaharienne. Quelles sont les principales constatations des projets de la Banque africaine de développement? Comme je l'ai dit, nous avons spécifiquement examiné 3 projets. Le premier, c'est le système de bus rapide de Dar es Salaam, la phase 2 en Tanzanie. Le train express régional de Dakar, phase 1, la section Dakar-Diamniadio au Sénégal. Et le projet d'amélioration de l'accessibilité et de la sécurité routière du corridor de Sirasi au Kenya. Globalement, on peut dire que les résultats en termes d'inclusion du genre dans le secteur de transport sont mitigés. Les éléments liés au genre sont souvent présents dans la conception, mais leur mise en œuvre et leur suivi restent faibles. L'exemple du système de bus rapide de Dakar, de Dar es Salaam. L'évaluation de la phase 2 du système de bus du système de bus rapide de Dar es Salaam a révélé des avancées modestes en matière d'inclusion du genre, notamment par l'emploi de conductrices et d'agents de bord, contribuant à remettre en cause les rôles traditionnels assignés aux femmes. Toutefois, des lacunes notables subsistent, notamment l'absence de consultation systématique avec les femmes utilisatrices lors de la planification, à limiter la prise en compte de leurs besoins spécifiques en matière de mobilité. De plus, les tarifs relativement élevés ont restreint l'accès de femmes à faible revenu à ce mode de transport formel. Enfin, le projet n'a pas intégré de plan d'action genre ni mise en place de systèmes de suivi fondés sur des données de référence, limitant ainsi la mesure de son impact sur les femmes et les filles. Le deuxième cas sur le train express régional de Dakar, reliant Dakar et Diamniadio, s'est distingué par l'intégration d'objectifs explicites en matière d'emploi des femmes durant la phase de construction, contribuant ainsi à des pratiques de travail plus inclusives. Toutefois, l'absence de cadre de résultats spécifiques au genre a limité le suivi des effets à long terme, notamment en ce qui concerne la pérennisation de la participation féminine dans le secteur du transport. Par ailleurs, bien que les infrastructures soient modernes, elles ne comportaient pas d'aménagements sensibles au genre, tels que éclairage adéquat, la présence de personnel de sécurité ou des zones adaptées aux enfants. Enfin, l'absence de mécanismes de suivi et d'inclusion sociale à long terme pose un risque pour la durabilité des avancées obtenues au lancement du projet. Enfin, le troisième cas, sur l'amélioration de l'accessibilité et de la sécurité routière du corridor de Sirara, ce projet a intégré des considérations de genre dans sa conception, notamment en lien avec la sécurité et les infrastructures de transport non motorisées. Toutefois, la mise en œuvre concrète de ces aspects est restée limitée. Peu de mesures ont été spécifiquement orientées vers les besoins des femmes et le suivi du projet ne comprenait ni indicateurs de genre, ni données désagrégées par sexe, ni si les aménagements tels que les trottoirs et les passages sécurisés présentent un fort potentiel pour améliorer la mobilité des femmes, en particulier les commerçantes et les élèves, leur impact a été atténué par l'absence de campagnes de sensibilisation ou d'accompagnement social. Enfin, la consultation des groupes de femmes et des communautés locales est demeurée marginale, réduisant ainsi l'appropriation et l'adéquation des projets aux besoins réels des usagers. En termes de constatation transversale, les projets évalués présentaient des niveaux d'ambition variables en matière de genre, mais ont globalement sous-performé quant aux résultats attendus. L'intégration du genre était plus fréquente au stade de la conception que durant la mise en œuvre ou le suivi dans la durée. L'absence d'incitation institutionnelle claire, telles que des cibles de cadres de résultats ou la collecte systématique des données désagrégées par SEC, a affaibli les mécanismes de redevabilité. Par ailleurs, les opportunités de transversaliser le genre dans les domaines clés tels que la sécurité, le transport non motorisé et l'emploi ont été insuffisamment exploités. Et pour finir, prochaine étape, pour assurer une croissance véritablement inclusive et durable, l'intégration du genre dans les politiques de transport n'est pas une option, mais une nécessité stratégique. La Banque africaine de développement a la responsabilité de collaborer étroitement avec ses pays membres régionaux pour impulser une transformation profonde et équitable du secteur des infrastructures de transport. Finalement, il est temps de dépasser le stade des constats et de passer à l'action concrète en construisant des systèmes de transport plus sûrs, plus inclusifs et réellement adaptés aux besoins de toutes et de tous. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for that amazing presentation. I think we can hear where we are doing well and also where we really need to improve. We really need to do a bit more consultation of the different voices when it comes to the design of transport systems and follow up in terms of the implementation process. Thank you so much, Joseph. We will now have Aram to make a presentation. Aram, over to you. You are most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay,
please go ahead.
Just
Thank
give
you.
me a second though.
All right.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Joseph, for the great presentation. And I think it's very relevant also what Dr. Fazil was saying at the beginning, and it's very consistent with what we are going to present today. So as mentioned earlier by Nelly, my name is Aram Gassama, and I'm a research analyst for DIME, and specifically I work for the ieConnect for Impact program, which is our main portfolio for impact evaluation in the transport sector, and is financed by FCDU. So today I will present to you a series of projects which are mainly led, you see there is a little message, which are mainly led by a colleague of mine, Girija Borker, which is the gender lead for DIME, and is a research economist as well, who unfortunately could not make it today, so I will represent the team on her behalf. So as Joseph was mentioning earlier, women and men do not have the same travel patterns. So the accessibility to public transport tends to differ, and women tend to rely more heavily on public transport than men, especially for informal transport. And this is a reality that is pretty consistent across the globe. And in general, women tend to have access to less well-connected network, and some financial constraints might also make him choose to access some type of transport that tend to be less safe. But as well, as Joseph was mentioning, there are some strategic decisions that are taken that do not feel optimal in order to feel safer. So longer trips or choosing alternative like ways to go in order to feel safer in the transport. And the way that women perceive violence and safety actually affects not only their physical mobility, but also the economic choices, which can have much greater impact on the longer run. So in this sense, my colleague Girija prepared also a review about all these different dynamics that affect women mobility. And if you're interested, I can share also the link to the paper later that was published just this year. And some qualitative studies and anecdotal evidence suggest that violence against women is pervasive in public spaces. However, it's very hard to know what is the true extent of that for as long as we don't have methodologies that allow to measure the extent of the issue in a rigorous way. And so when a problem is not well understood, it's very hard also to think of effective solutions. So the ieConnect program is pushing the frontier research related to women's safety in public transport, specifically by tackling 3 dimensions. First of all, trying to fill the gap when it comes to measurement by implementing data system and measurement methods that can help to clearly understand what is the extent of the issue. And then also by partnering with governments and different civil societies to understand first what are the consequences related to this issue once we understand this measure, but also what are some potential solutions that can be tested. And then once we understand among the one testing which one is the most effective, then scale them up. So today's presentation, I will focus mainly on measurement, but I will also take a couple of minutes toward the end to also show you very briefly what our portfolio has been covering in terms of consequences and solutions. So a first project, which will be the main focus of this presentation, is a project that the team has been conducting in Dar es Salaam in collaboration with different agencies from the government, especially DART and LART, and then in collaboration also with some local universities, especially MUHAS and other organization and development partners, to try to assess what is the extent of gender-based violence in public transport. And as a first step in 2017, the team went to check police reports. And during this initial consultation, we realized that only 173 cases of gender-based violence were reported in the police report. However, this represents only 0.006% of the population, which seems to be quite of an underestimate. So the team then compared also the data with national survey data, in which case we noticed that the incidence of harassment was reported to be around 20%. However, through national survey data, oftentimes it's not very easy to capture what are the nuances of this type of harassment. And so the team, in order to complement further the understanding, also check on some representative household surveys that were conducted during the implementation of the BRT. So while evaluating the BRT project, a specific module for harassment was included. And in this source, we noticed that 59% of women were reporting some experience of harassment. So noticing all these discrepancies make us wonder what is really happening here? What is the issues that we are facing, and how can we have some reliable measurement system that can help fill the gap in understanding what is really the extent of the problem? So as mentioned a little bit earlier, it's really hard to solve a problem when it's not well understood. And in the context of Dar es Salaam, we noticed that there were poor data, weak reporting system, and a lack of analytics. And so it's extremely hard then for the government to develop policies and interventions that can really tackle the problem in an effective way. And so how do we assess the effectiveness of these policies? That's where we designed together with all these partners an impact evaluation study to try to answer this question. And through the design of the studies, we tried to address three main questions. So the first being, what is the incidence of violence against women in public transport in Dar es Salaam? Second, try to understand whether introducing a mobile-based app could help to reduce the reporting gap and so have more incentive for women to report this kind of incidents. And then trying to understand whether access to this app can also improve women's mental well-being and physical mobility. And so this is where we implemented a study where we partnered with all the 15 universities in Dar es Salaam, and we deployed an app that we call Njiani, which means on your way. And the app was a tool to allow women to record any incident of harassment that they were either experiencing themselves or witnessing, and any element that could affect their perception of safety. And women could record through this tool all forms of harassment, so going from unwanted staring to some more serious assaults. And then they could also record some details like the time or the exact location of the incidents, as well as the mode of transport associated with it. And for the study, we actually sampled a set of female students that were, again, aged between 18 and 27 years old, which seems to be the group that is at most at risk in this region for some harassment episodes, and that own their own personal smartphone, and they were enrolled in one of the 50 universities in Dar es Salaam. Now, one important thing to notice is that in the context of this study, we did not try at all to change the mobility pattern of the students. Instead, we just let them travel according to their usual travel patterns and simply pay more attention to the incidents and record them. So we didn't try to modify any travel behavior. And so from baseline data, we noticed that out of the sample, over 90% of women tend to leave their neighborhood for more than 4 days a week, or at least 4 days a week. And the majority of them tend to travel by public transport for more than 1 hour daily. So they spend a quite significant amount of time in the transport. And they tend to travel by multiple transport modes, with the dala being the most commonly used one. So they tend to rely pretty heavily on informal transport modes. And in those transport in general, in public spaces more broadly, we see that the wide variety of harassments are both experiences and witness. And every single woman of the sample reporting being harassed at least on average once every 2 weeks. And almost 90% of them reporting being harassed either when they were traveling to a mode of transport or while on a mode of transport or getting off of it. So this is pretty important to understand how crucial it is to make transport more inclusive for women. And then it's also important to know that at baseline, only 2% of women tended to report these incidents to the police. And so this seems to also confirm how the reporting behavior seems to be a little bit underestimated. So what we saw from the report was quite of an underestimate of the actual incident of the issue. And that also can lead to think of what could be some measure that can facilitate and make more comfortable for women to report this kind of event. So in the context of the study, we implemented an experiment, especially in randomized controlled trial, which is quite the gold standard for being able to isolate in a precise manner what is the impact of a policy or a project. And in this case, we randomized our students in between 2 groups. So a treatment group that was given up to the Ninjani app, and the control group, which was only surveyed through traditional survey, which are the current gold standard for understanding this kind of issue. And within the treatment group, we furthermore split them into 2 subgroups. So a paid group, which included a sort of compensation for women to interact with the app, and then an unpaid group where women were just given access to the app, but no compensation at all. And so having this distinction between paid and unpaid is pretty important also to better inform policymakers on what are potentially some implication to bear in mind when trying to scale up this kind of project. So is it enough to bring a tool, or do you also need to consider that people need additional incentives? And both of the paid or unpaid group were also given a video that were explaining how to use the app and the main features. And I will show you the video also toward the end. Now, in terms of data, we set up a pretty rich data system with different sources. So as mentioned earlier, we had survey data where we basically implemented high-frequency phone surveys where we were calling students every week and then try to assess what were the different harassment episodes that they wanted to report, they either witness or experience themselves. And we also try to measure their perception of safety and mental well-being. Then we have the app data that was collecting the same information, but the students themselves were filling it in the app, so the ones in the treatment. And then beyond that, they also had a section for a diary to be able to see all the different incidents that they had recorded themselves. And we tried to see whether having access to the diary could also help to change their perception of safety. And then we also had introduced an observational data where basically we wanted to have a measure of ground truthing to try to assess more clearly, but what is really happening out there. So there are some things that are happening and that maybe our sample is not reporting to us. And so we train a set of enumerators to go out in the field and try to record themselves how many incidents they were witnessing in the same areas that were covered by our sample. And that was inspired by a study that was done in India, especially in Hyderabad, where also trained enumerators were there to sort of validate what is the extent of some dynamics that we might not capture through surveys or other data methods. So here today, I wanted to show you just a couple of very, very preliminary results. So just to take these initial trends and get a sense of what is happening. But again, the team is actually analyzing the data more deeply and trying to unlock more concretely what are the narrative behind the dynamics. So still to be taken with a grain of salt at this stage. But I think one of the key elements to note here is that, as mentioned earlier, the ground truthing exercise through the observational data seems to show a much higher tendency for reporting incidents, especially you can see it through the red bar. And then, nevertheless, we see that app data, when looking at total number of incidents, tend to report like double the number of incidents in survey. So we see that already there is some tendency to report more frequently. And the difference is even more stark when you look at severe form of harassment. And so in that case, almost 5-fold more times, people tend to report an incident when they are facing the app rather than when they are in a survey. Whereas with mild ones, we see much smaller differences. So people tend to speak a little bit more frequently about mild incidents. And then when it comes to the type of harassment, here again, you see at the top of the graph more like mild forms, but then when it comes to more severe ones, we still have, again, a larger gap when the app data tend to bring a little bit more data. So from this initial trend, what we could see is that both paid and unpaid users tend to record more often, and paid users tend to record even 3 times more than unpaid one. So the app seems to be a good incentive to record. However, another interesting thing to explore further is that the fact that people still tend to record and take time to actually fill their own data through the app when more severe incidents are happening. And so it seems to almost indicate that people value more the stigma associated with.
Sorry, Aram. I
Yeah.
think you have maybe you've reached your time limit, but maybe I give you 1 to 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm at the end. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just
all right.
finalizing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. So basically, the stigma associated with reporting a more severe form of harassment through a survey or a call seems to be higher than the cost of using the apps themselves. And so this seems to be one of the most interesting findings so far. So in terms of next step, the team will also deepen the analysis by also adding more spatial component to the analysis to better understand also what are the hotspots for this kind of incidents. And then look at the additional dynamics like exhaustion in surveys. So do people get tired from being called every week? What are the peer effects associated to knowing that someone in your network might be using the app? And then try to, again, validate what are the tools that can help us to get even closer to the truth. And we can also extend the study to other settings, like in Bangladesh. So here I had a little video with the demo of the app, but maybe we can skip it for now and maybe have it later for the Q&A session. And then I just wanted to make a quick sequel with the fact that we also see that the consequences for like safety perception affect lifetime decision for women. And we see that this was true in India, in Delhi, but it's also been measured in Lagos, Nigeria. And my colleague Alice, who will be part of the panel, might be able to extend a little bit more on that aspect. And finally, for testing solutions, we see that there are some type of policy sometimes that might have also unintended consequences. And so bearing in mind that testing solutions is a priority steps before scaling up in order to avoid also and minimize these unintended consequences. So this is it for now. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
To respond to any questions. Thank you.
Really, really grateful for that excellent presentation, Aram. It's really rich and there's so much that we can learn from it. We're now going to go into a question and answer session. I haven't seen any questions in the chat. Maybe if there's anybody who wants to raise their hand. Maria, I cannot see, let me see if I can see hands that are up. They could,
Nelly, I think there is one hand raised.
That is Apollo.
Yes, please.
Apollo, please come in. Thank you. Can we unmute his mic?
Teresa, can you kindly unmute Apollo's mic? Apollo Chaine.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Apollo. Yeah.
Thanks, colleagues, and thanks to Joseph and Aram for those wonderful presentations. I just have a comment and this kind of question, starting with Joseph. There was a mention about the lack of a system to track longer-term outcomes. And I thought that it may not be specific to gender only, but the bank as a whole, because when you look at our results measurement framework and a lot of our indicators, they are focused on access to transport, access to water, access to energy, access to that. And results beyond there never seem to be in the picture. And it's like probably the bank as a whole needs to have another system so that as it tracks everything else beyond access, then the gender outcomes will also be tracked, because they can't be tracked in isolation of the rest of the results for the bank. I don't know whether you have a comment on that. The other one was also the limited, there isn't systematic consultations of women in the design. And I also thought that this is done within the context of civil society engagement. And whether you've seen anything around progress we are making with engaging civil society in our design of our operations, so that the women can be consulted within such a framework, because it may be hard to consult women on their own outside the framework of a civil society engagement. And thank you for Aram. Thanks for that research and the findings. I wanted to understand whether you are also exploring whether there's a linkage between the results you're getting and the context within the place, within the country or the city where you're doing the research. For example, if those results are informed by the culture, by the population, the crime levels, do they vary because of a context? Because it will be good to understand the experience of harassment based on the general context that is reigning in a city. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Apollo. There's one other question in the chat, which I'm going to read out, and then we'll ask Joseph and Aram to respond. The question is from Sakshi. Joseph's presentation mentioned that gender considerations are often included in the design stage, but it falls off in the implementation and follow-up stage. Why do the gender considerations reduce during the implementation when it is already enshrined in the design stage? So I'm going to request the panelists to respond to those 2 to 3 questions. So who will be ready to start? Joseph?
OK. OK, je vais commencer par d'abord le fait de se focaliser sur l'accès au lieu de suivre vraiment les effets à moyen et long terme. Je crois que c'est quelque chose qui existe depuis longtemps. On parle beaucoup de gestion axée sur les résultats, mais en pratique, on reste concentré sur les intrants, les outputs sont allés de l'avant avec la recherche des effets. En fait, cela est essentiellement dû au fait que dans la conception des projets, on se focalise souvent sur le log frame, alors qu'on ne peut pas avoir un bon log frame si on n'a pas une bonne théorie de changement. Parce que dans le log frame, vous devrez suivre une chaîne des résultats. Lorsque cette chaîne de résultats n'est pas bien définie au départ dans la conception des projets, évidemment, votre log frame va se concentrer sur ce qu'on a l'habitude de collecter, accès. Donc, c'est une des raisons qui fait que, en fait, on se focalise plus sur les outputs que sur les extrants, parce que dès le départ, on n'a pas pris le soin de vraiment décrire comment on voudra atteindre les résultats, quelle est la chaîne de résultats nécessaire. Non seulement la chaîne, mais quelles sont les hypothèses qui permettent de passer d'un niveau de résultat à un autre niveau de résultat. Mais je crois qu'actuellement, au niveau de la banque, nous sommes maintenant en train d'introduire de plus en plus, que ce soit au niveau stratégique ou au niveau opérationnel, la préparation de ces théories de changement, de sorte qu'on puisse avoir des log frames qui sont plus consistants. Engagement limité au niveau de la société civile. Je parlerai de l'engagement de façon générale. En fait, l'engagement, le terme d'engagement, il y a plusieurs niveaux d'engagement. Le plus faible, c'est informer les gens. Informer les gens que nous sommes en train de faire un projet de transport et on pense que voilà, on a engagé, on a réuni les gens sur une table, on leur dit voilà, nous sommes venus avec un projet, on va faire ceci. Ça, c'est un niveau d'engagement qui est le plus faible. On peut aussi venir essayer de discuter avec eux, mais le vrai changement interviendra lorsque je ne sais pas comment on traduit ça en français, empowering people. Là, c'est là où on va trouver le vrai engagement. Donc, en général, dans nos projets, on ne fait pas de véritable consultation. On vient parfois avec des solutions, on réunit les gens, on les informe. Et quand c'est comme ça, il n'y a pas une bonne appropriation de ce que nous sommes en train d'apporter. Je vais m'arrêter là pour le moment. Voilà, il y a un autre problème. Pourquoi, ça c'est fondamental, pourquoi lors de la conception, les aspects genre sont pris en compte et dans la mise en œuvre, ce n'est pas pris en compte. Je n'ai pas de réponse à ça, mais je pense que le fait que au niveau de la banque, nous avons maintenant l'obligation de prendre en compte ces aspects genre et le département genre met en place des outils pour intégrer ces aspects genre, mais la mise en œuvre nécessite des ressources. Est-ce que les ressources nécessaires sont mises en place pour qu'on mette en œuvre ces actions? Donc, je vais caricaturer, ce n'est pas la réalité à 100%. C'est comme si au niveau de la conception, c'est un checkpoint. On fait en sorte, checking point, on fait en sorte que, est-ce qu'on a inclus le genre? Voilà, on fait tout pour que le genre apparaisse de sorte que lorsque ça va passer le stade de review, on sente que, bon, voilà, vous avez intégré le genre dedans. Mais la qualité de ce que vous mettez dans le genre, parce que si vous ne ciblez pas des activités qui vont vraiment avoir des impacts sur le genre, bah, ça devient comme un checkpoint seulement. Bon, j'ai inclus ça dans mon document l'essentiel, ça va permettre au projet de passer au conseil ou bien au niveau du groupe de discussion de la qualité des projets de passer. Mais je crois que nos collègues de transport qui sont ici peuvent mieux éclairer ou bien justifier ce fait. Bon, je vais m'arrêter là. Merci.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Joseph. I think the ball is in our court as the African Development Bank to see how we can invest more in doing the monitoring around implementing what we've said we would do. Let me invite Aram to respond, and then we'll have one more question, which Salimata will read out, and then we will move to the next session. Over to you, Aram.
Thank you, Nelly, and thank you so much, Apollo, for the question, which is very relevant between the linkage of the results and the context. So yes, I would say the results tend to be context specific. However, the need for measurement is something that is pretty universal. So we see that this tendency, for instance, when I was explaining about the fact that people tend to report more severe forms of harassment more comfortably to the app, is connected to some stigma that are specific to the culture. So it's not good to talk about this kind of incidents in this specific culture. However, the fact that measurement of gender-based violence is insufficient is something that is really true across the globe. And so for that reason, we try to develop an app that could be very easily adaptable to other contexts. And so for this purpose, we are also, for instance, right now designing a new project in Bangladesh, where the idea is actually to have women report incidents and give feedback with respect to how the driver and conductor were behaving in a transport. And that should be a mechanism also for drivers to be more incentivized to make sure that their ride are safe. And so the idea is to use the same app in Jani, just adapt the language and like some specific elements that are related to the culture, but then the app per se could be easily implemented elsewhere. So yeah, again, results can be context specific, but the need for measurement, it's a universal issue. So,
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aram. Salimata can go next, and then I will respond to the last question from Lucy.
Okay, so hello everyone. We have one question in the chat box from Kanga Josephine. Quelle est la stratégie de la banque pour combler les difficultés liées au genre en Afrique? So over to you, Nelly. Thank you.
Okay, so which of our panelists will respond to that?
Bon, en fait, quelle est la stratégie? La stratégie, c'est nos collègues des opérations ou du genre sont mieux placés pour dire, mais il faut reconnaître que au niveau de la banque, on a fait vraiment des efforts d'abord pour faire en sorte que le genre soit déjà pris en compte. On a encore beaucoup de choses à faire et on a des outils vraiment au niveau de la conception qui permet de savoir quelles sont les problématiques. D'abord, ils font comme un audit, comment ils appellent ça gender marker.
Sorry, Joseph. Sorry, to interrupt you. The interpretation is not working, so interpreters, please assist. Thank you.
So I have to start again, or I have to continue? No.
This is a message from the chat as well. I also can't hear you. Thank you. Yes, even from the chat, the participants also can't hear the interpretation. Yeah.
It's okay now?
1 second.
Is it okay now?
Hold on, Joseph. Okay, let's try.
Yes, I can hear the interpreter.
All right, go ahead, Joseph.
Okay, thank you.
En fait, j'étais en train de dire qu'au niveau, en termes de la stratégie, je crois qu'on a une stratégie genre ou une police, ouais, on a une stratégie genre, je crois, ouais. Et donc, nos collègues des opérations sont peut-être mieux placés pour détailler un peu le contenu de cette stratégie. Mais de façon globale, je crois que la banque est en train de faire des progrès. C'est pourquoi même il y a beaucoup de prise en compte du genre dans nos projets d'infrastructure, parce que la banque est en train de développer des outils qui permettent vraiment de faire une analyse de la situation de genre. Et sur cette base-là, il prévoit des actions. Sauf qu'on ne va pas au-delà des actions vraiment qui vont impacter nécessairement les femmes. Le discours au début, c'est, enfin, avant qu'on parlait de genre, c'est on vérifie si tu as des données entre femmes et hommes, mais ça va au-delà de juste des statistiques. Donc, on est sur la bonne voie, mais il faudrait, comme on l'a dit dans nos recommandations, il faut aller au-delà des considérations de genre au moment de la conception et identifier, je crois que lorsqu'on fait ce gender marker, il faut savoir identifier quelle action on peut mettre en place pour réellement impacter. Et lorsqu'on a identifié l'action, on mettra les ressources nécessaires pour atteindre les résultats escomptés. Bon, je ne sais pas si les collègues des opérations pourront ajouter quelque chose ou nos collègues de genre. Merci.
Thank you so much, Joseph. I think we'll continue picking up that discussion because we have another session coming up. I noticed we have 2 other questions in the Q&A, one by Tatiana. Tatiana, that question will be answered, I think, in the panel discussion. So just hold on, and if we have not answered it, we will try to respond to it. Joseph, you could assist us to respond to the question by Lilian about data systems in the African Development Bank. If you're able to, you can respond to that question. So for now, I'd like us to move on to the next segment of our session, the panel discussion, with a lot of gratitude to our 2 presenters who have really given us a good starting point in terms of, what is the research and evaluation telling us. Now, I will introduce all the panelists first and go to the first round of questions. We will have 2 rounds of questions. Our first panelist is Dr. Alice Duho, who is a researcher at the World Bank's Development Impact Department. She specializes in evaluating policy interventions in urban infrastructure, trade facilitation, and revenue mobilization. Alice uses diverse data sources to study customs and border crossing, cities and trade networks, and she holds a PhD in economics from the Free University of Brussels. Welcome, Alice. Next, we will have Sheila Akia, a senior transport engineer at the African Development Bank, where she manages major infrastructure projects across West Africa in countries such as Ghana, the Gambia, Nigeria, and Liberia. Sheila has over 20 years experience and has led award-winning projects, some of which we're going to hear about today, including the Fufuso Solar Road Project and the famous Bokwase Interchange under the Accra Urban Transport Project. She's a passionate advocate for women in engineering, and she actively mentors young women through various STEM-focused initiatives in Ghana and beyond, inspiring the next generation of female engineers. Sheila holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and the Master of Science in International Construction Management and Engineering from the University of Leeds. Our third panelist is none other than Oost Heimstad, who is a seasoned NGO's business manager and regional advocate for inclusive transport systems. He serves as the voluntary executive director of the SADC Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety and the CEO of the Namibia Road Safety Forum. As a crash survivor, his commitment to equity and inclusion is personal and deep-rooted. Oost also serves as the Africa Chapter Advisory Committee of the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety. Our final, but not the least of panelists, is Bibi Nyagali. She is a planning professional with experience in regional development planning in the government of Tanzania. Before joining the Ministry of Transport as a planning officer, she held various roles in government institutions, including the Kigamboni Municipal Council, where she was involved in planning and implementing development policies. Bibi has made significant contributions to ensuring that development planning aligns with community needs, particularly in the transport sector. She holds a bachelor's degree in regional development planning from AfDB University. So we'll give each panelist 5 minutes for each question. And we're going to start with Alice, Dr. Alice Deho. And please keep within the time so that we're able to have a great discussion afterwards. So Alice, how has the ieConnect initiative utilized evaluation and research insights to enhance the gender responsive aspect of sustainable urban mobility in World Bank member countries? And as you respond, also consider what practical challenges have you experienced in integrating these insights into strategic planning, and how are they addressed? And then based on recent research, please highlight some of the impact of gender responsive transport systems on women's mobility and economic participation. A mouthful, but I know you're up to the task. Over to you, Alice. Alice, you're muted.
I was saying, like, wonderful, and if it's okay, I'm just going to share a couple of slides just as a support, not really to read through. So the ieConnect program that Aram had the opportunity to present already, but is basically a consortium of people doing research around the issue of transport, and one of them is gender. And I'm so excited to be part of this panel today, because I really like the fact that it illustrates the continuum of actor needed to improve the gender dimension in transport. From researcher, we have like a tiny role in it, till transport engineer and civil society. So it's really exciting to be there and foster this conversation. On our end, so our aim is to provide evidence of what works and what doesn't work, or what could be improved in the transport space. And one of our key messages is usually that we always start with the idea that there is a gap, even despite the fact that all the multilateral, the African Development Bank, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank are very aware that we need to have some transport gender dimension in transport. We still a lot of the time have a data gap, right? Like, you come to the policymaker and you ask them, hey, the most significant issue for women in transport? And they will tell you violence, but they don't really have a good idea. They will tell you pricing or like the, design of the buses, but what is the quantity of that? And is there a mean to report that? And more importantly, what is the feedback loop to put that? So one of the elements that we work together with and like the difficulty we face is like that first missing data or the data gap, right? And so we do need to work together usually of thinking like, hey, how can we improve that? So it doesn't come at the end in the project as a log frame, but it's already in the habits of the implementing partners. And again, the potential return are huge, right? Not only for the wider economic benefit of women accessing employment, but also for the fact that we estimate that an additional 20+ million women will work in the transport sector if we had a better gender parity. So the second element is, Aram and Joseph discussed about the context a lot. I think this is really, really super important. And so that's why we needed alliance between policymaker, local implementing agency to find solutions that work. We do know that better gender inclusive transport gives women more access to jobs, but we don't really know where and how to design that. So one of the project we've supported really targeted that. In Pakistan, some of my colleagues and Kate Vibroni find that offering women any form of transport, so private transit, and I was part of a World Bank operation, increased the job application rate by 70%, especially if it's women only. So that is clearly specific to the culture, but including those kind of more experimental element or those pilots for women within a bigger operation help us think through the woman-specific constraint and make the project more gender responsive. The other element is like users of data. Like a lot of the agency we work with are really sitting on a lot of data that they're not exploiting fully. For example, e-ticketing data. And it's a mix of not having the idea and also not having the time. So something that we do is like develop with them a way of thinking through their problem. So for example, in Colombia, we found that some subsidies on the ticket price were like more important for women than men, because as Joseph said, women rely more on public transit because they have less means of transportation, access to, for example, private car, and they value safety in public transit more. Like in Lagos, we found that 42% of women mention having sexual harassment. And so when you remove the transit subsidy, for example, we find that men, they reduce their use of transit by 70%, but for women, they're not able to respond as much, meaning that the burden of the cost of transport is higher for women. Again, if we want to think about the transport responsive policy, those elements are really important, especially if after that, then you can change the pilot and adapt the subsidies to the people that need it most. And the last element of how do we do that and what are the difficulties? So again, we were thinking like, the problem is often this alliance to bridge the gap in data and really identify what works in the context. So one is like working together to develop that joint research program, enhance local capacity. And the second element is to build that feedback loop into the project. And at the World Bank, the Sustainable Mobility for All and the Gender Task Force have recommended some action to be implemented in the project. But it's also good to have gender-specific pilots in project. And Aram mentioned the Bangladesh road safety operation, where now basically they're going to streamline the use of this reporting app for harassment and try to incentivize bus drivers to be more responsive to women constraint. Again, changing mentality takes an alliance between like policymaker, researcher, civil society, students, a lot of people. So that's my answer to this question. I hope I covered it all. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alice. Very interesting to see those examples, really practical. So our second question goes to Engineer Sheila. Please share with us an example of how the African Development Bank has successfully integrated gender responsive designs and safeguards into transport infrastructure projects. What three main lessons can we draw from this experience that could be shared with other countries and institutions? Over to you, Sheila. Check if you're mute.
Thank you very much, Nelly. I hope you can hear me. As you know, with African Development Bank, gender mainstreaming is a very key issue in all our projects, as shown in it being captured very strongly in our 10-year strategy and captured in all country strategy papers. And we seek to do that on all projects. I would like to take example of the Accra Urban Transport Project, which I tax managed, which you all know as the Pokwasi Interchange Project. The project contributed towards an integrated transport and urban development solution in Accra. And the project promotes efficient movement of goods and people to and from the city, boosts trades and connects routes, provides income generation opportunity, and promotes transport services generally, and improves the livelihood of the people in the project area. The project also included, as part of its design, support to 2 women's groups, as well as ICT support to improve their income by more than 10%. The key gender initiatives that were undertaken under this project is making sure that we were gender mainstreaming in the planning and design. So that means the project involves gender disaggregated data collection to understand the specific needs of women, children, disabled people, elderly people, and the infrastructure designs included well-lit designs, included designs like well-lit pedestrian pathways, gender segregated waiting areas at bus stops, and accessible stations, all based on the consultations we had with the community. We also had safety and security measures. So the project inculcated safety features such as lighting and safe walking and crossings, especially for women who trade along that corridor, because we had some local markets that were on both sides of the project. We were also looking at how we could engage women and build their capacity, hence the support to the 2 women's group to help and lift up whatever they were doing. So we had the Bobima women's group who were into cassava producing, and the Manchi women's group who were into skills development. So we actively designed components to support those 2 world groups. And I dare say that those components do not even come up to 5% of the total project cost, but their impact are so meaningful. What do we also do? We monitor and evaluate with a gender lens. So when we have a logical framework, the outputs and the outcomes we are measuring are gender aggregated. We want to look at how much impact we are making in the lives with these outputs and outcomes to women and vulnerable groups. Then we also have safeguard policies and community engagement. The AfDB's environmental and social safeguards include specific provisions to protect vulnerable groups from adverse impacts of projects. So community consultations, incorporating women and marginalized groups, ensuring that their consent and their preference shape the project outcomes and the designs that we are doing. And this cuts across every project we do, not just on the Accra Urban Transport Project. What outcomes did we achieve? We improved safety and accessibility for women and vulnerable groups. We increased participation of women in transport-related economic activities, and we enhanced the understanding of gender-specific mobility challenges informing future projects. So this became very significant because the project exemplifies how the bank promotes gender equality by embedding gender considerations into the design safeguards and operational plans of transport infrastructure projects. What 3 lessons can I share from this experience? We had meaningful community engagement and participatory planning, and this is very essential. We learned that this is very essential because actively involving women and marginalized groups during the planning and design phase ensures that the infrastructure genuinely addresses their specific needs and their safety concerns. And we use the participatory approach so that they can have local ownership and then increase their relevance to the projects. Another key lessons we learned is that gender-sensitive data collection and analysis are critical for informed decision-making. It's not just about collecting the data. We have to disintegrate it down to the key gender forms that we have, so that by aggregating the data by gender and other vulnerabilities, we provide a clear understanding of the differential mobility patterns, safety risk, and the economic opportunities that we can create on our transport projects for all these vulnerable groups. So we do this by doing data-driven insights, enabled tailored interventions, improved safety measures, and targeted capacity building, making projects more effective and equitable for all genders. And the final lesson I can say we learned was integrating gender safeguards from the start ensures long-term inclusivity and sustainability for our projects. Embedding gender considerations into safeguard policies, project design, implementation, the monitoring frameworks ensures ongoing attention to gender equality throughout the whole project's life cycle, not just at certain levels. And this approach avoids retrofitting solutions later when you start getting problems, and it ensures accountability, and then it promotes sustainable benefits such as increased women's mobility, safety, economic participation, because we have women.
Sheila?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, so those are the three lessons I'll say we learned from those applications on the project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Sheila is known as the woman who built that big bridge, in Accra. Next, we are going to have Bibi from the Ministry of Transport. Bibi, the question is, what steps has Tanzania taken to ensure transport systems are safer, more accessible, and inclusive for women and vulnerable groups? We also want to hear a little bit about the BRT. Tanzania has made significant progress in implementing the Bus Rapid Transit BRT system. How has gender been integrated into the planning and operation of the BRT to ensure that it meets the safety, accessibility, and mobility needs of women and other vulnerable users? Welcome, Bibi. If we can have Bibi on the screen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to respond to the questions as follows.
Bibi, we cannot hear you. Please unmute.
I think she just needs to raise her volume, and I could hear her.
You hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. As introduced, I'm Bibi Nyangari from the Ministry of Transport in Tanzania. Here are some answers from the questions you asked me. Us at the Ministry of Transport, we have taken the various steps to ensure the transport system are safer, reliable, and the access to the women and the vulnerable groups. Therefore, here are some of the measures taken in order to ensure that the transport are accessible. Firstly, we have the National Transport Police, and this the police provides the guidelines on how the transport infrastructure should effectively consider the needs of all the special groups, including women, and the police cover all the modes of transport. Apart from the National Transport Police, also we have the regulatory authority, which known as LATRA. Here we have this regulatory procedure aims to ensuring that all modes of transport consider the needs of special groups. For example, here now we have the standard rail. For example, now we have the standard gauge railway. Under this railway infrastructure, the goal is to ensure that it enables special groups such as women, children, and the elders and the persons with disabilities to use the infrastructure safely and conveniently. Here in our SGR station have been equipped with disability-friendly infrastructure, such as designing the pathway for wheelchairs, passenger safety, especially for women and the children, has been prioritized through the have been prioritized through the adequate lighting, security cameras, and the presence of security personnel. Apart from those, also there is a service at the station are provided with the consideration for the needs of all the groups, including breastfeeding areas and the gender-friendly restroom. Also, in our road design, we consider the transport system safer. Here, the innovation in our road infrastructure lies in the gender response approach, which deliberates consider the needs of women and other special groups in the planning and the design of road construction projects. Specifically, measures are taken to ensure inclusive, such as we have the road signs, we have the parking lots for women and other vulnerable groups. This reflects a commitment to creating safer, more accessible, and equitable transport system for all users. Okay, coming from the progress in implementing the BRT system and how the gender being integrated into the planning. Here, at the Ministry of Transport, first, we should be prioritizing special groups. The BRT system has designed seats for the women, the elders, and the person with disability, thereby enhancing gender and the social inclusion. Also, BRT station has designed with the needs of all special groups in mind, including accessibility pathway for persons with disabilities, gentle ramps for wheelchair users, and the guideline marks for the visual impaired. Also, at the ministry, we provide education and awareness. Here, the various campaigns have been conducted to raise awareness on gender safety in public transport, including efforts to combat gender-based violence on BRT buses. Also, we have the National Transport Police. As I said before, this police ensure that the all modes of transport are inclusive and a safe transport for all gender and the vulnerable groups. Here we ensure that the equal access to services, the police emphasize inclusive service delivered. As a result, the BRT provides service that caters to everyone without discrimination by including breastfeeding areas, gender-friendly restroom, and support facilities for people with disabilities. There are some findings from what we have been asking.
Asante sana, Bibi. It is very encouraging to learn of the great steps that the government is taking to make transport inclusive in terms of safety, participation, and benefit. Thank you very much. We now have the next question to host Heimstad. And here are the questions. How can civil society organizations effectively advocate for and support the implementation of gender responsive policies in the transport sector, especially at community level? And as you answer this, maybe you could please share with us an example of where civil society's participation has contributed to positive gender outcomes in a transport project. So host, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes to respond to that. Maybe we can have host on the screen.
Thank you very much, Nelly. Firstly, I would like to gloat a little bit about Namibia. We have the most gender equal index in Africa at just over 80%. So a lot of the things we are talking about are part of our culture. And then we also are gloating as the best roads in Africa. So we are doing things right, especially when it comes on gender equality. We are doing things right. As a civil society.
Sorry, host. Let me ask IT to have you on the screen. We still have BB pinned to the screen. IT, please assist. Let's have host on the screen.
I'll go on. So long as civil society organizations, we are the people on the ground. We're working with the civil society. part of our daily work. Therefore, we understand the needs of the people. And transport systems are meant to serve people. They're not meant to serve cars as it is at the moment. They meant to serve all people, all road users. So therefore, women and children, other vulnerable road users are all involved in the whole process of, they should be part of the design of that road. This gives civil society or civil society organizations a critical responsibility, is to advocate for transport that is not only efficient for cars, but safe for sustainable and equitable transport mobility for all road users. So how do we see ourselves? How can we fit in, and how can we promote women in transport? The first thing is we need to listen, and this is very much to our designers and developers. We need to listen. We need to understand what the requirements are. There is distinct differences between a high-income area where 90% of the people are using cars, or even more, using cars for mobility, whereas you've got in a low-income area where 90% of the people are using walking or cycling. So there's a difference between the two. So we really need to listen to people. And unfortunately, in the situation which we are in Africa as such, 40% of all our crashes resulting in injuries or fatalities involve pedestrians, which is an incredible high number. And it really comes out of that the guys which are designing, even in a very equal distribution of the jobs, the guys which are designing the situation or the roads are not really acquainted with what the people on the ground want. And this is where civil society definitely comes in. Then obviously we can assist governments, authorities to translate the real world experiences into policies and recommendations. We can show what's working. We know what's working. We know what's failing, and that must change. So definitely we need to get into that. Then obviously we are also saying we need to build coalitions. We can't do it on our own. No government can do it on their own. No civil society organization can do it on their own. We need to work together. And to work together is quite a difficult part if you are quite far away from each other, the understanding of what's going on. But these coalitions, these collaborations foster shared learning and greater pressure on governments to act. So definitely that. We need to position gender not as a side issue. We need to position all people, all road users, not as a side issue. A road is not built for a car. A road is built for the road user. And all of us are pedestrians at one or other time, including women. Unfortunately, it is a matter of that women get affected most by crashes, because usually they really carry the consequences quite badly of what a crash brings to them. And the most obvious is the poverty they run in. In Namibia, we have been very successful with our schools project, where we as civil society organization went to schools together with our municipalities. We assessed the areas. We found out that women were very hesitant sometimes to let their children go to school, to take their children to school, because of security reasons, safety reasons, harassments. There's lack of lighting around schools, no sidewalks, and the very typical things. We then lobbied with our local authority, and so we came into a situation where the local authority accepted, yes, we have got a problem. We managed to reduce the speed around schools to 30 kilometers an hour. We managed to implement speed humps around schools, and we made proper crossings around schools. This obviously has changed the picture very much, and this is where what we are saying, and we can do big differences as CSOs. One of our partners in this whole project was a women's organization, a very prominent women's organization in our low-income areas. So to conclude my little bit here is civil society strength lies not in the control, but in the connection. So it's clear. We connect data with emotion, communities with policymakers, and gender equality with sustainable development. By working collaboratively, listening actively, and advocating strategically, we can help build transport systems where no woman, child, or any vulnerable road user is left behind. This will result for us in designers and engineers to prioritize people above cars when they design the roads, and that's how it should be. A call on all the development banks. This should be part of the evaluation process. In any road which is being built must be designed for people and not for cars. I thank you.
Thank you so much, host. I think you've really highlighted the importance of listening to people and the importance of partnerships, really essential. And yeah, that experience, I think, shines through what you have just shared. Thank you very much. We're going to go into the second round of questions, and we're going to take slightly less time. Once again, just stick within the allotted time. This time, we're going to give you 3 minutes to respond to this. So just do your best. So Alice, we'll start with you again. What strategies have proven most effective in building ownership and coordination, and what barriers remain? And this builds really excellently from what host has just shared. Over to you, Alice.
I wish no barriers were remaining. So one of the strategy, and I think it echoes what Horst was saying, like part of what we do as researchers is really listen to the actors involved and have this experience. And what we bring is like probably a view of what worked elsewhere, right? So some of the elements that we have developed is, for example, these apps that show that harassment is prevalent everywhere in some ways, right? With like differences depending on cultural differences, but basically the app is like something we designed thinking about giving the voice to people that usually we don't hear that much. So that's one of the things that really worked for us, and making sure that we involve those the civil society and the engineer that know how to deal with this, right? And sometimes we have to a bit force the hand of policymakers that because the projects become more complex. So in terms of like the barrier, part of the barrier again is like having hard data. It's easier to convince people to do things when we do have data to showcase how big the problem is and how fruitful would be the solution. So that's one of the constraints we're facing. The other one is, you know, it always takes time to change the business as usual. And integrating these gender-specific elements at each stage of the development of the project will a bit increase the project burden, right? And when we saw in the comments in the webinar chat, I saw somebody mentioning that in the project appraisal teams at the African Development Bank, they always have a gender component and gender specialist. Is the case for the bank, and then you design a log frame, but then, you know, as Joseph was saying, the stuff kind of deteriorate a bit, and then we just count the number of women user versus men, and gender disaggregated statistics are not enough to reflect the richness of the gender space in transport. So thinking about the constraint is how do we make this easy enough to streamline within project, but at the same time, not being too set in stone, right? What we don't want is a project that cannot be modified and this is the way to go everywhere, right? It's like including that element of responsiveness. And I think that that's why I'm so excited to be part of this discussion today, because I learn a lot from the other panelists and the other presentation about like what worked and what not. So those are the big constraints, like changing norms and not just mentality. I think like a lot of us are convinced that this is something we must do. The way to go is still, you know, sometimes we're not there.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Alice. Lots of work. We need spaces for connection from design to completion. We need a change in mindset in terms of building those kinds of collaborative partnerships. Thank you so much, Alice. Now let's move to Sheila. Sheila, based on your experience as a woman engineer in the transport sector, what challenges and opportunities do you see for women in the sector? And at this point, because of our time limitation, maybe mention a challenge and an opportunity, and just from your experience, something that we can learn from. Over to you, Sheila. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Nelly. Challenges, quick one. Again, it's there, the gender bias stereotypes. Women are often faced with unconscious bias, discrimination, or stereotypes that question their technical competence, which hinder career advancement and limit leadership opportunities in a male-dominated area like engineering. Also, workplace and environment and work-life balance, the demanding nature of the sector, combined with a lack of family-friendly policies, sometimes makes it very difficult, makes it very challenging for women to balance professional and personal responsibilities. I dare say that in the African Development Bank, we started working, we had opportunities to work from home before even COVID hit, because I remember when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was working from home a longer time before I even had her. So those are the challenges. If those opportunities are not there, it's difficult for women. Opportunities, they are growing focus on inclusive design and gender responsive projects. There's an increasing recognition of the importance of gender considerations in transport planning, providing women engineers with opportunities to lead and influence more equitable project designs and policies. And I also dare say again on the Accra Urban Transport project, there was a wide array of women playing very high technical and managerial roles on the project. And I said it brought a lot of attention to detail on the project. Another opportunity is expanding leadership and mentorship roles. As awareness grows about the value of the diversity, more organizations are promoting women into leadership positions and mentorship programs, creating pathways for future generations of women engineers and professionals in the transport sphere. So these challenges and opportunities highlight the importance of fostering inclusive work environments and leveraging the growing momentum towards gender equality to advance women's careers in an area that is male-dominated. So those would be my quick response to your question, Nelly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. We are looking forward to more women engineers across the board and across Africa who are building the big roads and the big bridges. Now, I have a question for Bibi and host, and it's the same question. How can we foster stronger collaboration between governments, development partners, and civil society to close gender gaps in transport access, safety, and employment? And I want you to mention maybe just two main things that you haven't talked about, or maybe you want to emphasize, just 2 points from your end. So we'll start with Bibi and then we go to host. Over to you, Bibi.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I think in our side, the things which could be done, government and the development partners. Firstly, most our projects are lack financial resources. So when the development partners investing financial resources in it, and it will increase safety, accessibility, and the participation of women. Apart from the investing financial resource, also there should be more encouraging community participating to ensure that the policies which are made by the government should be followed by the majority of the people. By doing so, it will lead the proper way to experience the transport system safe. By doing this, we can foster the stronger collaboration between government and the development. Also, when you talk about the BRT, I can talk about the BRT. We should encourage the private sectors, development partners to come to invest in order to foster the operation of these fast rapid transport. So I think by doing this, we can collaborate between the government and the development partners and the civil society to support the gender-based transport access. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bibi. You brought in the private sector, very key stakeholder in the space. Host, what do you say?
Coming from the NGO sector, from the civil society sector, the civil society organizations get accused of not being able to deliver. We must never forget that most, if not all, civil society organizations are really driven on passion. There's somebody which founded that organization, which started that organization. In many cases, that founder or the group of founders, they then fund this organization out of their own pockets. So the lack of understanding or the lack of performance as it is accused of the civil society organizations is not as much of that they don't know what they're doing. They don't have the resources to actually want what they're doing. Now, by getting involved with governments and other authorities, we create expectations, but we cannot meet those expectations because we don't have the resources to actually meet those expectations. So it's a catch-22 situation. And yes, we need to be capacitated. There is no doubt about it. I mean, we cannot learn enough in the world today, and especially in this fast-changing world. But we can capacitate an NGO or civil society organization as much as we want to. If we don't resource or make resources available for that organization or these organizations, the capacity we've built with the organizations is absolutely worth nothing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, host. Thank you for highlighting the element of resources in terms of the consultation process and ideally actually throughout the process itself in terms of transport design and implementation. And it also ties to a question in the chat about the roles of the bank, in a bank supported project, what would be the role of the government, what would be the role of the bank. Within our integrated safeguard system, consultation is a very key element, as well as participation of all the key stakeholders. Thank you so much to our distinguished panelists. We'll now have a brief session on question and answer. I know we have a very short time. We'll probably have about 5 minutes. There's some questions that have already been answered in the question and answer box. So I will request if there are any questions from participants, they can raise their hands and we will take their questions live.
Nelly?
Yes, please.
I don't see a question yet. Maybe as people are thinking about a question, you could come in with an explanation that you wanted to give us earlier on.
Sorry, Maria, which explanation?
You had some slides you wanted to share with us.
We could do that, but actually we could look at the app. Remember the app, the short video that Aram wanted to share?
Yes.
Yeah, we could see how the Njiani app works, maybe we could project that, and then if we don't have a question, I could go through the slides. Yeah.
Yes, Aram, over to you.
Sure, just give me a second. I want to share my screen again. Let me know if you can see the screen, please.
Yes.
Great. I'm just going to launch the video. Sorry, can you hear the sound? Otherwise, I will reshare. Actually, I think I didn't take the sound. Sorry, just a second. Can you hear the sound?
Yes. Go
Great.
ahead. Thank you so much, Aram. I think that's just an excellent use of technology in being, towards trying to address the challenges that we're facing in addressing some of the issues we have in transport, as well as some of the gender barriers. Now, let's see, do we have any questions that have not been answered? Maria, do we have any? Let's see. All right, somebody is asking if we can share the presentation from Aram.
So again, these are still preliminary results. So these are not things that are available for public sharing yet. But what I could share is actually the paper that I was mentioning earlier. That was comparing like the different constraints of women across the globe that Girija was leading. So I'm just gonna look for the link and send it in the chat.
All right. Thank you so much, Aram. I've not seen any other questions.
Nelly, neither do I see any hand up at the moment. You can come in. Nelly, over to you. Hey, sorry about that. As Nelly is trying to come back online, she has an issue with her technology. At this moment, I'd like to thank you so much for the great participation we've had from you, all our panelists and the presenters, and you, our audience. And I would like to invite Maimunatu Diop, the lead infrastructure specialist from the infrastructure department, to give us some remarks. Maimunatu, over to you.
Thank you, Maria. I think I will speak in French. We have translation. It's okay to speak in French?
Translation
Yes.
is available. You may speak in French.
Oh,
I don't know why
okay,
we
thank
still
you.
cannot see you, but please go ahead.
My video doesn't work. Okay, honorables invités, collègues de la Banque mondiale, chers collègues également de la Banque africaine de développement, alors que nous arrivons au terme de cette session, nous tenons à vous remercier sincèrement pour votre participation active et pour la richesse des échanges que nous avons partagés autour d'un thème à la fois stratégique et profondément humain. L'inclusion du genre dans le transport pour un développement durable. Et quand je dis profondément humain tout à l'heure, la vidéo qui a été visualisée m'a donné la chair de poule parce que c'est des choses que nous femmes, nous vivons tous les jours. Nous tenons également à saluer chaleureusement notre partenariat avec la Banque mondiale, en particulier à travers le programme ieConnect for Impact, qui joue un rôle clé pour faire progresser la recherche et les politiques autour de la sécurité et de la mobilité des femmes. Bravo à toutes ces femmes qui ont présenté aujourd'hui et qui nous ont donné tous les challenges que vivent les femmes dans les transports. Nous avons entendu aujourd'hui de manière claire et convaincante que la mobilité conditionne l'accès des femmes à l'emploi, à l'éducation, aux services sociaux et à la pleine participation économique et citoyenne. Et pourtant, de nombreuses barrières économiques, culturelles, institutionnelles continuent d'entraver la mobilité des femmes en Afrique. Nos intervenants ont formulé des recommandations structurantes, parmi lesquelles l'investissement dans les systèmes de données robustes et désagrégés par sexe. Je pense que ceci est une condition essentielle pour orienter les politiques publiques sur des bases solides. La construction entre recherche, la co-construction du moins entre recherche et politique pour garantir des solutions réalistes, contextualisées et adaptées aux usagers, particulièrement les femmes. L'intégration du genre également dès la conception des projets pour générer des impacts positifs durables et le suivi surtout de la mise en œuvre de ces projets-là pour atteindre donc ces objectifs. Je pense que dans ce domaine, nous avons noté que le programme ieConnect for Impact de la Banque mondiale joue un rôle moteur. Nous avons également eu le privilège d'entendre 2 exemples réussis de projets avec une contribution de la banque intégrant une approche genre ambitieuse. Donc, le projet qui a été présenté par ma collègue Sheila, soutenu par la Banque africaine de développement, a démontré que lorsque les femmes sont prises en compte dès la conception, les résultats sont tangibles. Meilleure accessibilité, infrastructures adaptées et participation active des communautés locales. Je pense que c'est vraiment une expérience, une belle expérience donc pour ce projet du Ghana. Le projet également, le BRT de Dar es Salaam, nous avons eu le privilège également de suivre la présentation. Ce projet a également été cité comme un modèle de réussite avec des aménagements qui favorisent non seulement l'efficacité du transport, mais aussi la sécurité, l'accessibilité et la participation des femmes, notamment dans la gouvernance et l'exploitation du système. Bravo donc à ces équipes qui ont pu faire donc de ces challenges une réalité à travers ces projets. Ces expériences nous rappellent que des solutions existent bien et qu'il est possible de conjuguer performance technique, durabilité et équité sociale. La Banque africaine de développement reste résolument engagée à promouvoir l'égalité des genres dans ses projets de transport. L'évaluation menée par IDEV sur notre appui au secteur nous aide à voir où nous avons progressé, mais aussi où nous devons faire mieux, notamment sur la mise en œuvre, le suivi des résultats et la coordination institutionnelle. Nous avons désormais une base de reconnaissance, une base de connaissances du moins, qui nous permettra d'améliorer nos pratiques et de renforcer notre impact, en cohérence avec nos engagements en matière d'inclusion, de durabilité et de résultats pour les populations, notamment la gente féminine. Je souhaite exprimer notre gratitude à l'équipe de ieConnect de la Banque mondiale, tous nos panélistes pour la diversité et la profondeur de leurs perspectives, mes collègues d'IDEV pour avoir initié et organisé cette session avec rigueur, tous les participants dont la mobilisation démontre que ce sujet est plus que jamais prioritaire. Et une mention spéciale quand même à notre modératrice, Madame Nelly Maina, pour sa gestion dynamique et structurée des échanges. Ce que cette session nous rappelle, c'est que l'inclusion du genre dans le transport est un impératif pour la justice sociale, pour l'efficacité politique des politiques publiques et pour un développement économique réellement durable. Donc, chers collègues, chers invités, continuons à travailler ensemble, à renforcer les synergies entre évaluation, recherche et action et à porter haut une vision de la mobilité inclusive, sûre et accessible pour toutes et tous. Je vous remercie et vous souhaite une excellente fin de journée. Merci.
Thank you so much, Maimunatu. We are really grateful for those remarks, and to our distinguished presenters and panelists and our audience, thank you so much for your participation, for your contributions. There's been a lot to learn today. Interestingly, you can finally see who I am. The video has finally decided to work at the end of the webinar, and but it's been great having you all. After we log out of this webinar, there is an assessment survey that will pop up. Please respond to it so that we know, how we can improve and what you liked about the webinar, and what else we should focus on in the next similar session. So many thanks to you and wishing you a good evening. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Merci, Nelly. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Merci à tous.